Good morning, Hemshech. Ayin Beis, what we call the siyum, the ending of it, as we're learning it through Toras Sholom, the concept of divine unity. So on page in Toras Sholom, the Rebbe Rashab Sicha from Simchas Torah Tofresh Ayin Daled, which is 1913. So we are on page 200, close to the bottom of 200. First column. So summing up, in Ayin Beis been discussing what Shema Yisrael and Baruch Shem, the Yichud, Yichud Ilah, Yichud Tata, the two different ways of understanding the divine unity, and then the union of these two, which means that from God's perspective, Das Elyon and Das Tachton are one, meaning they're all connected with Atzmus. So there was a line there at the end that the main emphasis of understanding the unity between existence and the divine. So here in Toras Sholom, he's been talking about two types of yichud: Memaleh lamata, Momata l'mayla, I should begin, and Memaleh lamata, from the bottom up, top down. That was respectively letter Ois, Ches, was about Momata l'mayla, Ostes is about Memaleh lamata. And then in Os Yud, he began discussing that these two types of yichud also manifest to two types of avodah, panemius, where there's also two manners, bottom up and top down. So middle of the bottom up, and then in Os Yud Aleph, he's going to talk about the avodah Memaleh lamata. So Memaleh lamata means that we begin with existence and with its tzimtzum and everything that existence entails, and we work our way back to the source. So in the yichud level, he spoke about how we come to understand existence is not obviously independent. It's created by God. That in turn, through its tzimtzum, that tzimtzum itself is also a part of the divine Elikim, Havayu Elikim. That's why that even the tzimtzum is also kol b'atzmus. But there he said, we don't fully understand it entirely, so we need some amunah. Memaleh lamata, the yichud, is the other way around. We start from how Atzmus sees. Atzmus is everything. He said, is alts. God is everything. What does that mean? That even existence and the tzimtzum and mitzias of the eights, the example he gave was a piece of wood. All that is really Atzmus. And as he explained, so it is wood, it's wood, but it's also Atzmus. It's this and it's not this, because it's the Atzmus of it. The Atzmus part, that how Atzmus is and how Atzmus is, it carries it all, as he explained there, and now he's not defined by its parameters. So now in Avodah, he explained, Memaleh lamata, the Avodah is, you begin, like he said, the Avodah of first, Avodah al pitam v'das. It's a contemplation and a understanding of the divine energy that is within existence, just like a soul within a body. Then you understand that that's the ikar. The primary existence is the life force within all of existence. And as a result of that, there creates a longing to be kiruv and dveikus, to be connected, close, and attached to it. Kiruv and dveikus belikus. He qualified, when he say that's the beginning of Avodah, that follows another preparatory stage where you need to clean up your act. The way I put it was. In other words, you have to be in a place, you have to be, like he says, a shtikl mensch. You have to already be in a place where you're receptive to all of this contemplation. But bottom line is, once you are, and that's you don't begin davening until the certain element of humility and that type of cleansing. Then comes the first step in Avodah, is this is bonus and elikus. That leads us then to understand that the divine within existence is only a reflection, because Atzmus in itself is hafla v'avdala. It's completely transcendent beyond. So it's like appreciating the grandeur of the divine. Then he added the eighth and hafla, not just the grandeur, but also the manner of how he's beyond us. And then he added one more level. the level, not just that Haflah compared to Giluyim, that he's beyond us, like he's more powerful than we are, but he's actually completely removed Haflah mitzad atzmei, fundamentally a different reality altogether. Muflah mitzad atzmei, not just relative. And that's where we stop. So I'm going to continue close to the bottom of column 1 on page 200. So here's what he says. Ukiyidua, and you can follow along if you want to. If not, as I said, everything will be understood because I'll explain it all. It's known, sheyesh gimel madreges bechinas Memaleh kalalman v'sevel kalalman v'atzmus ein sof. Shehu l'mayla mesevel v'Memaleh. So there's 3 levels when we talk about divine relating, the divine as it relates to existence. Memaleh kalalman is the divine within that permeates, like you said before, like the soul within the body. Sovev kalalman is a transcendent energy, and Atzmus is higher than Sovev and Memaleh. And now he's going to explain that in the context of what we just learned about our Avodah Mamata L'mayla. We go from Memaleh kalalman to Sovev kalalman to Atzmus. Mamata L'mayla. V'hinei, and now ha'er v'achayis ha'mislabes be'elmus u'b'chinas Memaleh kalalman. The energy and the vitality that manifests within existence, that's called Memaleh kalalman. It fills, permeates. V'atzmus ein sof, shu b'chinas haflah v'avdala. And Atzmus ein sof, what he means here, being not the reflection of the divine, but the core of Ein Sof, that's Sovev kalalman. Shu b'chinas haflah v'avdala. That's that state of haflah, wonder, and separate, transcendent, beyond. Hu b'chinas Sovev kalalman. That doesn't enter into existence; it hovers above. So it's like a sense that we have a sense of awe, sense of mystique. That is not internalized, but it's above and beyond us. Omnam, but then there's a 3rd level. However, yesh b'chinas haflah shel Atzmus ein sof shemuflah be'etzem mitzad atzmei. Not like it's beyond us. Like you say, for example, you look out into the solar system or the universes, and you say, wow, look how vast all of existence is, completely beyond us. But then there's haflah mitzad atzmei, not in relation, but it's fundamentally a different reality. That's higher than Sovev Memaleh because Sovev is still, we're grasping something beyond us. It's like saying, you understand what the teacher is teaching, that's Memaleh kalalman. You understand there's something above your head, which right now you don't get, and therefore you realize there's something much more here, but it's not fundamentally apart from you. You may at some point get it in time. And then there's a level that remains completely removed, completely apart. In the example I always give with the art and the artist, there's the artist within the art. So from the art, you come to understand the artist, what he invested in the art. Then the art tells you that the artist is beyond this piece of art, but he's still an artist. Or maybe he's not even an artist, but he's still, relatively speaking, something that created this art. But he's beyond. You're completely in awe of his being. Then there's a level where a complete unknown dimensions to him that you don't even know about. And you realize he's not even an artist, he's not even beyond being an artist. So was them that had. Okay, so now he's going to explain. So what happens? So obviously the first level is something on our terms that we can relate to. It doesn't completely overwhelm you. It's integrating godliness within our lives. Sovev kalalman is not integration, but it's still not completely nullifying you because it's beyond you, but it's not complete apart. Atzmus, the 3rd level, says that when you come to realize that Atzmus is higher than Sovev as well, and Memaleh, that causes a type of suspension of his senses. You completely get lost in that presence. Even though Sovev kalalman is also an element of awe, but as I've discussed a number of times, you could have awe, but you're feeling it. You could even describe it. You could say, I'm standing in awe. But there's a point where you completely get lost so absorbed, so completely overwhelmed by it, you can't even talk about your feeling of awe. So in this battle, Gamri Makol V'Kol is completely nullified entirely. In the parentheses, he qualifies and says, Omnam ein ze habitl shenizbar bedrush mini atzeres shana zu. However, this is not the bitl that was discussed in the Maimer of Shmini Atzeres of that year, which actually, I believe, is an Ayin Beis Maimer. So I have to look up what he says there. We'll leave that for later. I didn't look it up. But he's clearly qualifying that what he's talking about, this bitl is not the bitl of the Maimer of Shmini Atzeres Ayin Dal, which I have to, again, I'll look up, I'll let you know what I find. So this bitl, as a farlitzach legamri. Farlitzach means he completely gets lost. Lost doesn't mean lost as in lost in the woods or something. He means he loses his entire being, his entire sense. It's that type of experience. And he compares it now. He says, Idos al derech v'hisalfus. It's similar to someone who faints, a state of being in a faint state. So it's one thing, you could be awake, but you're in awe of something. Here, hisalfus means like you fainted. Now he says al derech. It doesn't mean actually fainting, but it means you're in such a state of loss of faculties. That's what happens. Was that Ian for hisalfus is echas as ver nostalgic the keches v'chushim, the keches v'achushim. That this level of hisalfus also includes that the faculties and a person's senses get lost. Faculties means the faculties of intelligence, of emotions. Senses are like sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell. Now we have to find examples for this in our lives to be able to appreciate it, obviously. So I'll do that soon, but I want to first finish the whole subject and then we'll discuss it more in detail. But he's talking now about the third level, the Muflah mitzad Atzmus, what he called higher, Atzmus Ein Sof, higher than Sovev and Memaleh. Let me stop for a moment if anybody wants to ask anything. He's not finished the subject, but in case any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Sorry, Rabbi, could you say which part is Or Ein Sof in?
Or Ein Sof is a very general term. All three are Or Ein Sof.
Oh, okay. So it encompasses them. Okay, thank you.
Is it a level of Sovev? Is it level before Tzimtzum or after Tzimtzum?
The Sovev before and the Sovev after. Sovev is a relative term. It depends on your level compared to your level. Every world has a Sovev, and there's a general Sovev. Even Memaleh Kalaman exists before the Tzimtzum. The root of Memaleh Sovev. These three levels are everywhere. It's three general levels in all of Hishtashu, before the Tzimtzum, after the Tzimtzum. In general terms, you could say after the Tzimtzum is more Memaleh, and before the Tzimtzum is more Sovev. But you could also apply all three in both levels.
Thank you.
Okay. So he says, "Mevesini da'aflo von Atzmus, eichshu muflah mitzad atzmei." We don't know this grandeur, this level of one of the muflah. I keep using the word wonder because I don't have another word for pella, but muflah here is much more than wonder. It means a type of a sense of something that is completely beyond. He says, we don't know what this is, how he's in that state. That's what makes him so different, because we have nothing in common. For him, as mir wollten das wissen, wo doch uns aufgeheben. Because if we would know it, then it would lift us up to that level. L'mayla mishmei meremim. We lift above higher. Shmei meremim mean higher than all the highest heavens. Was hafila shmei meremim volt eich gewen kegargir chadel legabe zeh. And in truth, even Shmei Merem, even the highest levels, the highest heavens, the highest levels of revelation, would also be like the seed of a mustard seed. compared to this. In other words, that's how meaningless it would be, so insignificant. However, he does come qualifies.
An expression.
I know it's expression like the seed, like the mustard seed. It's expression to show like a grain of sand on a beach. It's so negligible. It's so meaningless. It's so nothingness. Yeah, it's an expression, right? Not as Faran Sadikim Agdelim, Vazei Deheren Das Yeah. Say there, he says there are great Sadikim that do sense this, that do get it. That That means it's not understanding. That means they have a sense of it. So when you say, we said before that all the senses and faculties get suspended. So how does that work with these tzaddikim? So he says like this: and by they taka becomes also, it suspends their faculties and their senses. Is Memaleh tzavos chapter. So the question then is, if they suspend, so then why are they different than us? Then what are they holding on to? From doha to dorgodnisht. Because we're saying that this third level is where you completely lose yourself. She has nothing. Because we're not talking about level 2. We're there, he has, it's not comparable to the level, to what we sense, the Ein Sof that's relative to Giluyim. There, it's true, it's beyond us, but it's not completely beyond. In level 2, the chushim, the senses have some achiza. Achiza means some grasp. They have something to hold on to. It's true, it's awe. Not like the first level that's internalized, but it's something to hold on to. Meretos ba mention. We're talking here about a person. So he still did not clarify how is it by these great tzaddikim. Let's see, let's read it. And we'll understand. It's like it's like the Hainu, and now he refers to who he's talking about, the Mittler Rebbe's Chushim, which means we're talking about the Mittler Rebbe's senses. That's clearly the Tzaddik Godly he's talking about here. Why he chose the Mittler Rebbe, I'm not sure. It could be because this idea is discussed by the Mittler Rebbe. I have to research that a bit more, but that's what he says. So we're talking about a person, so that's where we're talking about someone whose chushim are grasping something in level 2. But that's not level 3. But in the third level, we're talking about the Atzmus Ein Sof that is completely fundamentally removed from all of it. Here he has no grasp. So then what is he holding on to when we say that he has something to experience here? So the Rebbe Rashab answers like this: He grasps Teira. He grasps the Teira. So in other words, he's using that gift called Teira to give him something to hold on to be able to enter into that third dimension. That's where he's able to sense Atzmus Ein Sof, this third level, through Torah.
The Memaleh Rebbe is the third dimension.
He didn't say the third dimension. First of all, he brought the Memaleh Rebbe by the second dimension, just for the record. As I mentioned.
A mistake. He's talking here about the tzaddikim agdelim was
I know exactly what he's talking. Listen. Let me explain how I understand it. If you understand it differently, you'll have it different. But I don't want to confuse people here. He began by saying that we don't have a grasp of it. It's beyond us. Even Shmei Meremim, it's completely beyond. And if we did have, it would elevate us. He said there, that they do sense it. Yeah.
So talking about
let me teach it and explain it. I don't want to confuse people. Let me explain it the way I understand it. And then, as I said, everybody here has the right to understand it differently if you want to. Let me explain it because it's just going to confuse people. And then he said, so then the question is, since even these tzaddikim also lose their senses and their faculties, so what are they? So how are they experiencing? They have nothing left. Because it's not compared to level 2. Level 2, which is also beyond, but there's some chushim, he says, and he's speaking about a person, a person, and he means here the Mitler Rebbe's chushim. So there, his chushim are able to hold on to something. But when you're talking about the third level, but in the head from the Atzmus, what is the achiza there? Is he referring to the Mitler Rebbe? Perhaps. But he brings the Mitler Rebbe in step 2 that he does have an achiza. So it could be spoken also about Mitler Rebbe, but where he brings it that he does have an achiza. That's very clear. But what's the third? So how do you the third? So he says the third is through Torah. So let me finish the learning this, and then I'll stop and everyone can comment what they like. 1 second. Now I'm going to read till the end of the paragraph, then we'll stop. As b'chol haga, u'b'chol dibur, hayetzim epiv, every utterance and every word, every fiber, every quiver, you can even say, every vibration that leaves mepiv, that goes out of his mouth, that heter atzmus. When through Torah, every part of you then feels and senses atzmus, the third level. And the second way that you hear that you sense it is through mitzvahs, because he's doing mitzvahs of Hashem, and through that he also is mamshich. Through that also is transmitted Gilui Ein Sof, and that's why the lechein nikra mitzvahs b'shem shluchim. That's why mitzvahs are called messengers, ambassadors, in the name of ambassadors. Kamaimer kabdu ha-mitzvah shem shluchai. Honor the mitzvahs because they are God says they are my messengers. And the messenger of someone is like him. So therefore, mitzvahs also give us a taste, a sense of him, of Atzmus. Now, does was mitzvahs nikr b'shem shluchim zeu shaykh l'ishtalshlus. He's qualifying that mitzvahs are called shluchim. That relates more to ishtalshlus. Unintended that herter Atzmus ein sof baruch hu. Next page. In Torah is somewhat of a higher level. That he senses Ein Sof, not so much as mitzvahs is more nishtalshlus. But the Rebbe Rashab then qualifies. But here in our discussion, I'm not focusing on the difference, to understand the difference between Torah and mitzvahs. Nor Bechlal is in Torah and mitzvahs that heter Atzmus Ein Sof. I'm talking here in general terms, not the distinction between Torah and mitzvahs. In general, those are the things that the tzaddikim, those that want to grasp the third level, you need Torah and mitzvahs for that. And I'm not getting into now the difference between them. And this is the Aveda, says the Rebbe Rashab, from the bottom up, where we began with Memaleh Kalalman, went to Sovev Kalalman, Haflah, in Giluim, and then Muflah mitzad Atzmus Ein Sof, which is discussed now, and now he brings that Torah mitzvahs is the way to experience that. So that answers that even if you lose your faculties and your senses, but the Torah mitzvahs you can hold on to. And that's what gives you the ability to experience that third level. Now, most likely he started saying tzaddikim that hadn't us yet. So what's the difference how they experience it than how we experience it? So that's room for discussion. But with that, we finish this paragraph, this sif. Yud ba'davedu mamata l'mayl. I'll stop here, and now you're free to say or ask or comment anything you wish.
You once said, Rabbi, that when the tzaddikim, they used to hold on to a cup. Is that where they were when they were holding on to the cup?
since I'm not a tzaddik and I'm not on that level, I can't tell you where they were. I have
Okay.
no idea. It could be they held on to a handkerchief or something, or the Nevi'im held on. That was to ground them. Yeah, that could be in order to counter the factor of the soul not expiring entirely. So it could be to counter that level of experience, the third level, they held on to something to contain it. It's possible that you can explain it that way. So my answer is, yeah, I mean, it would make sense. The question is what level exactly they reached, that I can't say, but it makes sense because the whole point was that they shouldn't lose themselves entirely.
Okay.
But then
Thank
you could say, why don't they hold on to Torah and mitzvahs instead of holding on to a physical object? That they could also ask. But that's, for further
Question.
discussion.
Is it possible to, can you explain situation when how Torah and mitzvahs can help tzaddik in this situation if they are on mitzvahs and study Torah lower than level of Atzmus actually? How it can help?
Well, because the Torah mitzvahs are not man-made. God invested himself in Torah. In other words, it's his wisdom, and he put it in, it's expression Anochi. God says, I inscribe myself in the Torah. The mitzvahs are his messengers, like we just said. These are his so-called tools. So he's giving us divine tools, essentially, so that when you study Torah, you hold on to Torah and mitzvahs, you get an experience, something that a human being could never get on their own. Now, there's different levels of that, but that's essentially that's the point. Because you're holding on to something that is divine instead of something that's human. Till now we're talking about tam v'das, your own contemplation, your own cognitive and emotional experience is your tools. That's your koiches and chushim. Those are your faculties and senses. When you get to level 3, where one loses those faculties and senses because they're human. So then we need to have divine tools. That's how I understand it. But there are a lot of questions here. There are a lot of things that need to be explained. In context of Ayin Beis, we learn that Torah and mitzvahs are necessary when the neshama comes down below to be a siyua, to be like a light that helps elevate. That's why this is going to help us understand the flow in Ayin Beis of how mitzvahs and Torah and tefillah and all the different tools that we learn about help us see in the dark in this world. But then the neshama will elevate to a place that it itself can experience the divine, even higher than Torah. But that's not for right now. We'll get there. But I will definitely refer to this piece in Toras Sholom when we discuss that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Could be that after I was thinking about it, that what you said sound more correct. But what does it mean that the tzaddikim hagdelim der Herren dos ja?
It means that for a regular person, you can't really grasp it or sense it. They could, and they have bitla keches v'achushim. Like, for example, they lose themselves. So then he asks, so how then do they experience it if they lose themselves? So that's where he answered Torah and mitzvahs. That's how I would answer. However, once you bring Torah and mitzvahs, maybe that also allows all of us to some extent experience it. Obviously not quite like they do. He doesn't elaborate. I can't really answer completely. I just see that's what it sounds like he's saying. Tzadikim deherendus, yeah, but then he qualifies it has to be with Torah and mitzvahs. Because he said clearly, he doesn't have anything. And he's explaining it by a mention. A mention is his chushim. So what does he hold on to? Torah and mitzvahs. he doesn't elaborate more than what he says. So that's why I'm not really adding anything except what I did explain already. And again, once he said that in this, see, it's hard to say that the third level is completely not accessible to anyone except it's tzaddikim gdelim. But he wanted to make sure to know that as much as it's not accessible to tzaddikim, like when you say that Moshe Rabbeinu, lo yireni adam v'chai, that no person can see me and live. That's essentially this idea. You can't be you and see God. You have to lose yourself. As we talked many times, uponai lo yiro. But ponai has to be through lo yiro. But that's said by Moshe. Not everybody has the level of re'isas acherai either. That's a Moshe level. But you have to say me'ein that we also have. So how did Moshe Taka experience godliness that's beyond his chushim and keiches? You have to say he had something, and that's probably the Torah mitzvahs. That's when that's in Ayin Beis. This is a tremendous piece that I'm going to talk about a lot more when we go back to the Hemshech. That Torah does something that Momayla Lamata you can't get Momata Lamayla. The thing is, here he's talking Momata Lamayla, but he did bring Torah and mitzvahs into it. And Torah is Amshacha Momayla, because we didn't create Torah. Torah is not like Tefillah that we initiate. Torah is a gift from above, Matan Torah. So you see here that there's something coming, even the Momata Lamayla on the third level, that in a sense is being achieved through Torah and mitzvahs. And I think this is connected to Ner Mitzvah Torah and Ayin Beis. But I don't want to go there because it just confuse matters. I want to finish what we're learning here. We have one more page, really. And then we can go back to Ayin Beis, and all this will come, I think, alive in another dimension. So for now, we'll say like this. Tzaddikim definitely sense something that we don't. How? If they lose their chushim and keiches, Torah and mitzvahs. That's what he said, and that's Momata Lamayla. Bottom line is this. All of us have to climb these levels. The question is how far we climb, everyone relative to their level. You have Memaleh Kalaman, Sovev Kalaman, and Atzmus Ein Sof, what he called. That we could say for sure. Each one has their own particular experience. Like in other words, when you start applying this, you could find places where, for example, you appreciate godliness in your life. You don't have to lose yourself. You just have to be aligned. You have to have bittul. Like for example, recognizing Hazana Sarkel, God feeds you. Shahakal Nir Bidvare. This is Memaleh Kalam. Then there's an element of awe that comes like Sovev Klam. Asher Kedishanu B'mitzvah V'tzivanu. So it's already Kedishanu B'mitzvah V'tzivanu. It's Ratzon Hashem. That's like Sovev. Then there's a level that's completely beyond where you realize, like let's say when you say that the Eber says built a Mitzias Nimtza or Mitzias Matzmuse, we could talk about it. But we don't really get it because we're not God. It's just, we have to, the only way you can really appreciate it by losing yourself and being completely absorbed in the process. Now, tzaddikim delim get it specifically through Torah mitzvahs. The rest of us get it, I guess, on a lower level. That needs to be discussed more, but I would stop here. I don't want to go further detail in that because we're going to get back to this regardless because we have to talk about all these levels. Remember, the question also is, are these three levels correspond to the three levels in Ayin Beis? Even though he's still talking all Memata Lamayla. But now comes Memaleh Lamata, is the next section. So then once we finish it, we can then see try to place everything in the right place. Any other questions?
You mean the three levels with Yehuda Tata, Yehuda Ilah, and then the third?
And the union of both of those. I don't know if they correspond to this.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, because the Memaleh Lamata is not, Ayin Beis doesn't use that language really. At least my recollection. I have to go back. Because he's talking there more about Bittul Yesh and Bittul B'Mitzias. Das Elyon, das Tachten. Perspective from above, the perspective from below. I have to still research that more. We'll see.
Thank you.
Because he did say in Ayin Beis, Das Elyon is you go from the Yesh to the Ayin. And Das Tachten, you go from the Ayin from the Yesh Amiti to the Ayin of the Ayin Ish Amiti. From in Das Tachten, you go from the Yesh HaNivra to the Ayin. So it is a somewhat of a Maila Matla Matla Maila approach. But let's finish this and then we'll go back, we'll figure it out. Okay, should we continue reading? So we're not, the next letter, Yud Aleph, Os Yud Aleph. So he says like this, what's the manner of Aveda? We spoke now from the bottom up. What's the manner of Aveda from the top down? As Erzich Mizbeinen, here, the person contemplates undet hert and senses and feels. In other words, it's also like Vashavesa Levavecha, not just V'yadaita Ayem, even though Mamai Lamata may not be V'yadaita. So let me strike that. I don't know if I could use that verse on Mamai Lamata. Mamata Lamata for sure, but not Mamai Lamata, not from the top down. So what's he contemplating when you talk about Aveda from the top down? Undet hert, then what do you sense? As Atzmus Sein Sovev Baruch Hu Mamish is Nimtza Lamata Kamei Lamaila. So before we learn that you're going from existence and you're recognizing the divine energy within existence, and then you come to realize that God's beyond that, and even beyond that, etc. Now you're starting the other way. Atzmus is everywhere, below, just like he is above. So you're talking now, you're not talking from the lens of existence. You're making clear Atzmus is everywhere. Lamata kamei lamaila. B'chol sa'adav yisper. And he measures every step. Meaning he's within, he guides, it's like every step of the way of a person. Uboichen kliyesa v'libe. And he evaluates, boichen is always watching, and the person's kliyesa means his kidneys, but it means boichen kliyes v'lev, like the Alter Rebbe brings in Tanya. That he knows everything that we are thinking and calculating and everything that we are devising, all our strategies. Kleyes v'libe, it's an expression. He's boichen, he's examining our kidneys and our heart. Obviously, it doesn't mean necessarily physically like a doctor does. He means everything that's processing there. And he understands and gazes and listens and concentrates al kol ma'asav, to all the actions of a person. In other words, Atzmus right here is within you in every detail of your life. Below, just as he is above. The Hainu azazet alts. God sees everything. Remember before we said, Ed is alts. That was the expression before. Ed is alts. Azet alts, he sees everything. That's the avodah of it. Yichud was the concept, the philosophy of it, that God is everything. Now, what is an avodah? An avodah means that he's in every fiber of your being, in every detail, and sees everything. Un es is im negeya. And not just he sees it's negeya to him. It's relevant to him, it's important to him. It's not like a bystander. He's invested in it. V'hainu heim b'sur mara v'heim v'asei tev. Both in how we avoid the negative, doing bad things, and how we do good things. As afrir is asei tev, as the asei tev for na'idin is negei and Atzmus. Afrir means before, so I guess he means that even though the order is surmara asei tev, but we begin with Dasei Tev. And what does that mean? Dasei Tev for Na'idin. When a Jew does something good, he does Negei and Atzmus. It's Negei and Atzmus. I know you'll say, didn't we learn earlier that it doesn't affect all the way in the highest levels? So first of all, that was creation. We're talking about Aveda now. Aveda is Negei, and we learned in Ayin Beis what that means. But he's saying it's Negei and Atzmus. Unkamoy Kain Basur Mara. And the same thing is when we avoid and refrain from doing something inappropriate. As yeder tunuf na'idin, every movement of a Jew's movement was chalila nitazeh, that God forbid is not according and aligned with what God wants. He does Negeya in Atzmus. Negeya, it's Negeya to him. It touches him. Important to him. So that's the Izbanus of Memaleh Lamata. You're not talking about, okay, here's existence and there's a divine energy that's sustaining it, and you move further to understand the artist. Now you're talking about Atzmus is chosen to create existence. And in every detail of existence, he's there. Like we learned in the Yichud. He is it. He is everything. He's within every detail. He's dos negei in Atzmus. Memaleh lechere v'bal das es is negei in Atzmus. So now, since it's negei in Atzmus, so the same question he asked before, column 1 on page 190, 199, he said, memaleh lechere v'bal das negei in Atzmus is der dos hagbala. That's hagbala because our actions are defined, are within parameters. Al zehu atiritz. And that we have the answer that we discussed earlier. Ihu tof is bekula almin v'lesman de tof is bei. Remember, we learned that God is everything. God is within everything, grasps everything, but nothing grasps him. He defines everything, but nothing defines him. Like we said before, the Hakbola is not really Hakbola. So it's negate to him, but it doesn't define him. That gam shezeu negeya. Even though it's negeya, it means it's relevant, it's critical to him. That doesn't mean Atzmus does not get defined and contained by it. He remains Atzmus. That's what we discussed and explained earlier as a Atzmi. This was earlier, we didn't read it inside. This is earlier in this Sikha. He spoke of Atzmi, something that's a etzem, not a creation, not an extension or expression. Is von als bleibt er. So he gave the example that when you burn something, even if it has different elements in it, something will always remain. The etzem of it will remain. That's what Atzmi is. Atzmi is the core that always remains. Von als bleibt er. Al derel via eitz, as men is im sedev be'esh. Like a piece of wood, when you burn them in fire, bleibt der efer. You have the efer is the ash that remains. It's not completely disappeared. Ash. Vala atzmi is from als bleibt it. Twice fun. Maybe a mistake. Vala atzmi is von als bleibt it. Because the atzmi always remains. You can't eliminate it. It does vile advet nitfis. Why? Because he's not nitfis. He's not defined by any of the elements. So something that's defined by something, you eliminate his definition, it no longer exists. But Atzmi always remains removed. Same thing here, even though the Avodah, our work, is negei to Atzmus, he's not contained by it, he's not defined by it. He does not. One second, okay, stop here. Any questions? Let me stop here before I continue. It does get so.
One technical question. For some reason, I hear you much worse than before. Maybe necessary to fix microphone. I'm sorry.
I don't know if it's you. You guys are having difficulty hearing me?
It sounds the same to me the whole time.
It sounds perfect.
It sounds normal.
Okay, so it could be on your end something got lower.
Okay, thank you.
What does it mean? Atzmus wird nicht passiv.
That nitfus.
Geya. So if it's not nitpas, how is it negeya?
Well, first of all, it's negeya because he wants it to be negeya. That's number one. He doesn't have to be negeya. He wants it to be negeya. That's the simplest way of explaining. I discussed this both when we learned it in the previous page, as well as from Vayikra Tzav Ayin Hey. If you remember when he spoke about how Avodah is negeya l'mayla, So basically, he says there that negeya, when something, for example, something that I care about somebody, and they do something, it's negeya to me because I'm connected to that person. So I'm nitfis by it. I'm nitfis in it. I'm negeya like that. By Atzmus, you can't say that type of relationship because he's not dependent on anyone, and he created everything. So negeya means that it touches him. He wants it to touch him, but it does not limit him. That's the whole point of Atzmus. Like he said, he creates Agbola, Mokam Arden Einem Min Amida. So from our perspective, it takes up space, but from his perspective, it doesn't take up space because, like he said, who tough is bay, who tough is bekula, ma. It says, "Iu tough is bekula, the less man the tough is bay." Who became a she'elam. So basically, in simple English, as I said, God wants it to be relevant, and He's within every aspect of existence, like He said, but it does not define Him. And that's that. That's why is that not possible? And the next piece, again, I said we have to read this many times to wrap our head. I'm not saying it's a simple topic. I understand the question, but if you go to Vayikra and Sav Ayin Hey, which I referred to a number of times earlier, there he talks about it more at length. This negeya, not negeya. It's a paradox at the end of the day. When I spoke about it here by Avodah, let's see. Yeah, on page 1471, discussed that, which takes us back to yeah. I think I'm going to stop here. So tell me if you have if anybody wants to ask anything else.
Are you defining nitfas by he's not defined by it? I would think nitfas would be to grasp. That nitfas should be grasped, that you can't grasp in Atzmus, rather than defining it. Atzmus is never definable, but it could be grasped. Maybe that's what he's saying here. It can be grasped.
He's not talking about us grasping God. He's talking about God not being grasped by the experience. Nitfas is not teifus. Teifus means we can't be teifus him. We can't grasp him. But here he's saying that even though it's negeya, he's not being contained. The words I used are contained, defined. Those are the two main words I used. Teifus is technically, it is grasp. So you could say, yes, he's not grasped by it, means he's not what? What means he's not grasped by it? It means it doesn't contain him. It doesn't define him. To me, that's synonymous. He's not talking about that we can't grasp him. That's not what he's saying. He's saying that the fact that it's negeya, he says like, it's negeya and Atzmus, so that would seem to mean there's a Hagbola within Atzmus. So he says he's not nitfis in it. Nitfis is almost as yeah. In other words, for example, if I'm speaking to you, I can't be speaking to somebody else at the same time. Well, at least that's not the way to. It's not. It won't work. Why? Because I'm engaged with you right now, and and therefore, as I'm engaged with you, I can't be engaged with something else. So Atzmus is saying can be engaged with something and not be engaged at the same time. However you explain that. So maybe engaged is another word, but engaged here meaning like he's somewhat contained, somewhat, I don't know, limits him.
And when it says negeya,
it's like I mentioned the other day, I gave the example of two children playing a game, playing with toys, and you as an adult get down on your knees with them and start playing as well. So you're not nitvis in it, they are. You know, them, this is their life. You're doing it because you want to play with your children. You want to have them laugh. You want to laugh with them. You're choosing, so to speak, to confine yourself or to define yourself for the moment. Like I explained, for example, when you're older, a mature person, it's not going to affect you, the petty things that affected you when you were less mature. So it doesn't mean it's not negated you, but it's not nitfus. It doesn't define you. You're not going to be shaken by it because you have a certain, I guess, aloofness is not the right word, a certain detachment, in a good way detachment. I don't mean detached as in a negative way. I mean in a positive way. You're not, it's not going to shape and, when people get caught up with something, that means they're nitfus in it. When you're not caught up with it, you're not nitfus. Not because God is beyond it, but because Atzmus just doesn't experience things that way.
I wonder if this is a good mashal, the notion of how a human being thinks about an idea, and therefore grasps the idea, and then he is to some extent grasped by the idea because he can't think about anything else. Science says that you can only think about one thing at a time. Now, maybe if you're a nervous Nelly like me, you think about many things in a short period of time. But technically, the brain can only think about one thing at a time. Here it's saying that Atzmus is not that way. God can think about an infinite number of things, be nogea. He can be involved and be in touch with infinite number of things at the same time, but yet he's not grasped by that alone because he can consider all these infinite other things and then some. He's still not grasped by all the things that he's nogea by.
Well, you said two different things. The example that you said about that we think about something is similar to what I just said. When you're engaged with someone, you're talking to them. So you're talking to them, you can't be discussed, you can't be engaged with someone else. You can't be involved in something else. So yeah, that example like it works because all these examples are similar. As far as the explanation that he could be engaged with other things, that may be part of it, but it's much more than that. It's not just because God could be engaged with other things. Even the negay, even if he's involved and it's negate to him, he's just not defined by it. So yes, one application may be that he could also do other things at the same time, if you want to compare it to a human. But this is a lot higher than that. It's not just that he can do other things. You could have there are people who are multitaskers who can do more than one thing at a time. But the point here is that it's just fundamentally, qualitatively not defined like we're defined by the things that define us. So in other words, God could create difference between blue and green and between 6-7 days of the week. And he's not defined by that distinction. We live in that, we live in time and space. God could create time and space and even manifest within it. Like you said, every detail, every fiber, but he's not defined by it. And he's not contained by it, the words I'm using.
But the idea that even though that he is not contained, the Negeia is with the whole essence, so-called, of the Atzmus.
Well, I don't know about all essence. He doesn't use that word here, but it does say it's Negeia and Atzmus, yeah.
It's not like the older man that is playing with the children.
Why not?
Well, why not? A person is also Negeia. He wants to play with his children. It's Negeia to him, but he's not defined by it. Anyway, of course, it's not exactly like a human being because we're talking about Atzmus here. I'm just giving examples in our lives where you can find something that you're negated to you, but you're not defined by it. You're not contained by it or limited by it. Like if someone comes into the room and sees you playing and they say, oh, that's what you do all day. You play games with children. The answer is no, I'm doing that because I want to do that right now. That's why I brought the will that God wants it to be negated. Like that big question, does God need us? So the answer is very straightforward.
Our behavior is very...
One second. I'm in the middle of saying something. When we say, does God need us? So the simple answer is he chooses to need us. He doesn't need us. He chooses to. Once he chooses to, then he needs us in some way.
My point is that the choosing is not such a, okay, it's Negeia nisave.
Who says it's optional? If God chooses something, it's actually quite important. Why did he? Because he chooses it. I'm not minimizing. It's just that he is not defined by it.
But
Anyways, I said this is a deep topic, and
Wow.
I'm not saying it's going to be understood in one shot. We talked about it many times. Go back to those memorim I referred to, and it needs to be processed. I said some words here that hopefully are helpful.
But I thought our discussion earlier was even above Nageya, that we were trying to deal with how do we relate to Ani Hashem Lo Shanisi. That's a level of Atzmus that there's nothing Nageya, so to speak. Nothing touches it, nothing changes.
Yeah, but that was,
it.
we spoke, that was creation, not Avodah. Remember that? That's why I referred to that page. You go to page 1471, he talks about this very explicitly.
Yeah. But so you're saying that Avodah does affect the level of Lo Shanisi? Avodah.
I didn't say that. I said I referred you where to go to, where I discussed it at length. That's all I said. I didn't say it affects Lo Shanisi. He doesn't say that. Ani Hashem Lo Shanisi is talking about the process of creation. Anyway, the word is here not. I don't know if I would use the word shinui here, but the fact that's the bigger discussion whether Avodah changes anything in God. That's why I don't want to go into it right now. That's exactly what I'm doing. I'm just telling you where I discussed it, because it's a whole other discussion. I don't want to confuse matters here.
Okay.
Here he's speaking about Negeya, and he speaks about that there as well. Page 1471, and going back to the Memorim of Vayikra and Sav Ayin Hey, volume 2. I will get back to it at some point. Just right now, I don't want to go into detail because it's going to be, I think, too much of a, it'll just be too confusing.
Okay.
Look, by saying it's Negeya and he's not Nitvas, you can say Lo Shanisi, even though it's Negeya to him. If you want to put it simply.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's another way of understanding when you say something's Negeya to someone. So for us, it changes us. For Atzmus, it doesn't change, but it's still Negeya to him. That's why I keep saying that he wants it to be something he's Negeya to him, but it's not a change fundamentally. Remember, if you're going to this level of Atzmus, you're not talking about Elikus on our terms. You're talking about Atzmus where there is paradoxes, that all these things don't have to work according to our laws of logic. We're trying to apply our laws of logic to Atzmus. It doesn't work, because for us, the laws of logic would dictate that if you're negate to you, you change by it. If it's negate to me how you're behaving, that means if you behave a certain way, I'm one way. If you behave a certain different way, I change. You do something good. Let's say you do something for me, you make me happy. If you do something against me, you make me sad. That's a change. That's a shinui. That means I'm not just negay, I'm also nitfas. What he's saying here is that Atzmus doesn't work that way. It could be negaya, but it's not nitfas. So that's exactly why he said that most of us can't get it. He said before, what did he say? That we don't. He says, we don't know. We don't understand this. This is not something that's understandable. Even though before he did say that you don't need a munah for this level of yichud. But that's another discussion that we need to have. But we'll get there as well. There's more to discuss. That's not finished. I want to just see where he's going to finish with this. Then I'll go back and analyze it. I'm acknowledging that this is not completely. I didn't explain it completely.
Wasn't when we shake a lulav, we have Atzmus. We're connecting with Atzmus. Remember what he says here? Is this a lulav or is this Atzmus? It's neither this or that. Eights, right? But okay, but I'm applying eights to a lulav branch. When you're shaking that eights, it's both in at the same time, right? I would assume that it's Atzmus. We just don't necessarily perceive it. That's the process. With me, Das Takton doesn't perceive the emes of Das Elyon. But we have but you said we don't, the Rebbe said we don't need a munah to understand that that's true, that we still have Atzmus here. It's not just the lulav, it's Atzmus. We're touching Atzmus, even though we don't necessarily perceive it, I think.
Well, I just want to say the way he spoke about it here was not necessarily through a mitzvah. Even wood, that's not a mitzvah. With a mitzvah, you have a whole other dimension because the mitzvah does give us more of an experience of Atzmus. So that's why I distinguish between wood and lulav. We'll talk about that as well. He's going to go back to that. He already alluded to it before that mitzvahs help us experience Atzmus more than because the fact is that all of existence, even just a piece of wood that's in a forest, on a tree, that concept applies. That too is Atzmus.
I thought when we talked about, or when the Rebbe wrote about the mashal of the piece of wood or a tree, that he was only trying to give us a better understanding of Atzmus, perhaps on Atzmus terms, but not our perspective toward Atzmus. He wasn't talking about what we get out of touching a piece of wood. I didn't hear it that way. Although one can extrapolate that if I touch anything material, and let's say not connected to a mitzvah, because I agree that's
what you say is correct. Exactly. He was not talking about us touching it. He was talking about how Atzmus is that. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you're correct. That's why I'm not talking here about the avodah. We're not talking about the avodah and the mitzvah that connected to physical matters. That's not what we're addressing right now in that sense.
What I want to understand is how can he say that you don't need emunah to grasp these concepts? And I forgive me for being vague. I don't remember which specific concept he's talking about.
Yichud Momai Lamato. He spoke explicitly by Yichud Momai Lamato. On the top of page 199, second column.
But not to be, I don't want to be trite or stupid even, but you can't even care about what is Lamai Lamati. It means from God, from a transcendent level to a more imminent level.
So I explained it in that class. I think
no,
I explained
no,
it.
I'm not coming to question you. I'm coming to say this. I'm trying to ask a question. If you don't have belief in God, if you don't believe in God, then how can you begin to understand? Well, I guess if you say, okay, well, I don't believe in God, but you believe in God, and here's the God that you believe in, who his nature is such and such. Is that what he means by you don't need emunah to grasp this?
No, that's not what he means. He compared it. The Yichud Momata L'mayla, he said, we can't fully understand. And the Yichud Momai L'mata, we could fully understand. So Yichud Momata L'mayla needs some things that we can't fully understand, so we rely on Amunah. Amunah is not about believing in God or not believing in God. It means you need Amunah
to take the next leap
understand.
To get there with your logic. I see your point. Sorry. Remember, I'm 3 hours behind you all the time. Sorry.
It's fine. It's fine. I'm just explaining it.
Yeah. Now you got that neuron fired. Okay. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay, so let's stop here. The first column of page 201.